mynews.studio.
For 87 hours, every light in Britain was powered without a single bit of fossil fuel. How did they manage that? And could your country do the same?
Today is October 19th, 2025. Let's ground this in some numbers. In the first half of the year, global clean energy investment hit $386 billion, a 10% jump from last year. But not every country is moving at the same pace. The United States actually saw a drop in investment, mostly because of policy uncertainty. Meanwhile, the EU boosted its spending by 63%, and China nearly doubled what it put into small-scale solar. Why are those regions moving ahead while others slow down?
A lot of it comes down to targeted policies and market changes. The EU really leaned into offshore wind and small solar, while China shifted to distributed solar to get around new restrictions on large projects. These choices led to record-level investments. But let's zoom in on the headline: Britain's 87 hours of running on 100% clean power. That's a jump from just 2.5 hours back in 2021. So, what made this possible?
It wasn't straightforward. Britain had to keep the grid balanced using mostly renewables, about 72% wind, 18% nuclear, and 10% solar. The rest came from hydro and biomass. Wind was the big driver, thanks to strong weather and more offshore farms. But wind isn't predictable. What did they do when it dropped?
Grid management was key. The National Energy System Operator used advanced forecasting and controls to track supply and demand in real time. They also leaned on interconnectors, sending extra power to mainland Europe or bringing some in if needed. Nuclear and hydro gave the grid a stable baseline. Plus, grid-scale batteries and pumped hydro storage soaked up surplus energy and released it during lulls.
So, it wasn't just about building more wind farms. Making the grid smarter and more adaptable was just as important. Government contracts for difference mattered too. They locked in prices for clean power and gave investors confidence. But even with all that, what were the main risks during those 87 hours?
The big risk was grid instability. If wind or solar output dropped sharply or demand suddenly spiked, they might have had to fall back on fossil fuels. With better grid tech and storage, they smoothed out those bumps. Britain's experience shows renewables can meet demand, but only if the grid is modernized and backed up properly. Do you think other countries could follow this path?
It depends. The EU and China offer two different examples. The EU's success comes from stable, long-term policies and regional planning, especially for offshore wind. Permitting got easier and auctions helped. China's focus on distributed solar meant less risk from market changes and more local control. Both put money into grid upgrades and storage. For countries just getting started, there's a clear lesson: stable policies, investment in infrastructure, and support for projects of all sizes matter. But why do some countries still struggle to build that momentum? And support for projects of all sizes matter. But why do some countries still struggle to build that momentum?
A lot of it is regulatory fragmentation. Too many overlapping rules, not enough coordination. Supply chain hurdles and grid bottlenecks also slow things down, especially in emerging markets. Still, this year's record investments and operational wins show progress can happen. The blueprint is out there. The real question is, who will put it to use?
As climate targets get stricter and energy independence becomes more important, these changes aren't just good for the environment, they're becoming necessary for economic security. Do you think we'll see more countries reach 100% clean power, even if just for a few hours?
If there's real investment in grid flexibility, storage, and stable policy, it seems likely. Britain's 87-hour run proves it's possible. The transition is picking up speed, but there's still a long way to go.
That's our deep dive into the global clean energy surge and Britain's record. We talked about rising investment, how countries are making renewables work, and what it takes to reach these big milestones.
Thanks for joining us as we unpack the data, the breakthroughs, and the lessons for the future. Stay curious and keep wondering, What would it take for your country to reach 100% clean power, even for just one day?
Thank you for listening. This episode was powered by mynews.studio. Try it now for free.